चलिए जी रिकॉर्डिंग भी स्टार्ट होने वाली है. Okay, this is our first lecture after midterm, and this is related to storage classes and scope rules, right? So variable, we already studied about variables. So this is something which relate to the memory location and where we can store values. So variables have their name and their data types, right? So here we will look into the what is the scope of the variable that we declare, right? So the scope is actually, this is the region of the program, and broadly speaking there are three spaces where variables can be declared. So scope, it means that scope is actually what is the region of the program in which we can access or we can use those variables, right? So let's suppose whether we can use the variable within a function or outside a function. Can we access this? What is the visibility of that variable in the program? ठीक है. तो क्या मतलब वेरिएबल्स तो हमने ऑलरेडी पढ़े हैं. उसमें क्या नेम होता है, डाटा टाइप है, डिफरेंट उसके डाटा टाइप है, साइज है, वैल्यू होती है इसके अंदर. तो हम देख रहे हैं कि स्कोप क्या होता है. स्कोप मतलब वो प्रोग्राम में किस रेंज तक, कहाँ तक एक्सेसिबल है, विजिबल है, कहाँ तक हम किस रीजन तक हम उसकी वैल्यू को यूज कर सकते हैं वेरिएबल को. So variable can be declared inside a function. We can declare a variable inside a function or a block. So block is something like the statement, C++ statements, when it enclosed in the curly brackets, this becomes a block, simple. So block when C++ statements are enclosed in the curly brackets के अंदर आप statements लिखते हैं, ये एक block बन जाता है. ठीक है. ये beginning curly brackets and ending curly brackets, this becomes block. So you can declare the variables inside a function or a block, and these are called the local variables. ठीक है. तो वेरिएबल्स आपके पास डिक्लेयर करते हैं फंक्शन में, ब्लॉक में लोकल वेरिएबल्स कहलाते हैं. You can also declare in the definition of function parameters, which is called formal parameters. If you remember the function, programmer defined function maximum in the previous lecture before midterm. In the definition, in the function definition, we had the parameter list. In the parameter list, we write int num1 comma int num2 comma int num3. So there in the parameter list we can also declare the variables. So in the definition of function parameters we can declare the variables outside of all the functions, which is called the global. And the third where we can define the we can declare our variables is the outside of all the function. This is at the start of the program, and these are called the global variables. ग्लोबल वेरिएबल्स हमारे पास क्या होते हैं, जो कि हम प्रोग्राम के बिल्कुल स्टार्ट, जिस तरह से आप फंक्शन प्रोटोटाइप द सेम लाइक यू डिफाइन द प्लेस वेयर यू write the function prototype on the same place, you can also this is the same place where you can declare the global variables. So at the start of the program, where the global variables you can declare at the start of the program, before the main, before all the function, outside of all the function you can declare the global variables. So each of these variables, if it's inside a function or a block, it have a different scope. Its scope is only limited to that function only, and if it's outside all function or it's global variables, then its scope is file scope, right? तो अगर आपने फंक्शन के अंदर वेरिएबल डिक्लेयर किया है तो उसी फंक्शन के अंदर आप उसको एक्सेस कर सकते हैं, उसका स्कोप उसके अंदर ही होगा. आउटसाइड दैट फंक्शन हम उसको एक्सेस नहीं कर सकते. और ग्लोबल वेरिएबल्स हैं तो वो फिर ग्लोबल वेरिएबल्स होते हैं तो हम किसी भी फंक्शन से हम उसको एक्सेस कर सकते हैं. उसकी विजिबिलिटी किसी भी एट एनी part of the program, we can visible these types of variables. So coming towards the local variables, variables that are declared inside a function or a block are called local variables. They can be used only by the statements that are inside that function or block of code. लोकल वेरिएबल्स आर नॉट नोन टू द फंक्शन आउटसाइड देयर ओन. ठीक है, अभी मैंने आपको बताया कि लोकल वेरिएबल्स वही होंगे जो कि आप फंक्शन के अंदर डिक्लेयर करते हैं, इनकी विजिबिलिटी फंक्शन के अंदर ही होगी. और C++ की वो स्टेटमेंट्स जो कि उस फंक्शन के अंदर है वो स्टेटमेंट, उन स्टेटमेंट्स के अंदर वो वेरिएबल्स आप यूज़ कर सकते हैं. Outside that function we cannot access these local variables. Its accessibility, its visibility is within, or its scope is within the function in which it's declared. Quick example, here you can see that you have the local variables int a, b, c, right? These are within main is also a function, so within the main function we have these local variables that are declared, and here we also initialize them, and c equal to a plus b, and we are it's a simple, so these are local variables. Global variables are defined outside of all the functions, usually on the top of the program. So on the top of the program, we define the global variables. Global variables will hold their value throughout the lifetime of your program. So its lifetime, it would be there. Global variables will be there until the last statement of your execution of your program, right? Um, so its accessibility is throughout your program. Its value will be there. Its lifetime is up to your program, right? So global variable can be accessed by any function, as this global variable is global, right? So this can be accessed, this can be visible by any function. Global variable is available for use throughout your entire program after its declaration. When it's declared, after its declaration, you can use it through any point of your any portion, from any portion of your program you can access these global variables. So here is an example. Look at this. Outside of all the function, here there is only one function, main function. So here the global variable declaration int g, this is the global variable. This is outside the function. This is at the start of the program, and it's the same declaration as you did for usually you do for the local variables. तो इसमें कुछ भी डिफरेंट नहीं है, ठीक है. डिक्लेरेशन उसकी उसी तरह से है जैसे आप लोकल वेरिएबल्स डिक्लेयर करते हैं, लेकिन इसकी पोजीशन थोड़ी सी चेंज है कि दिस इज एट द स्टार्ट ऑफ द प्रोग्राम एंड इट्स आउटसाइड ऑफ ऑल द फंक्शंस, ठीक है. तो int
मैम तो
g
इससे क्या होता है?
इसमें इसका स्कोप डिफरेंट होता है ना, हर वेरिएबल का स्कोप डिफरेंट होता है. अभी यहाँ पे तो सिर्फ एक मेन फंक्शन है. लेट्स सपोज एक फंक्शन 1 है, फंक्शन 2, फंक्शन 3, फंक्शन 4, 4-5 फंक्शंस हैं आपके पास. तो अगर ग्लोबल वेरिएबल आपने डिक्लेयर किया है तो वो सारे के सारे फंक्शंस ग्लोबल वेरिएबल को एक्सेस कर सकते हैं, विजिबल होगा. जी जी जो है एक ग्लोबल वेरिएबल है, जबकि लोकल वेरिएबल this local variable has its scope within this main, and if there are function 1, function 2, function 3 function, these function cannot access these local variables a, b, right, but they can access global variable. So scope is different, local variables and the global variables. So if you can look into this example, here we declare the global variable, and here we have the local variables. We initialize the local variable, and we just simply used g. Here we didn't declare it locally. We didn't declare g local within this main function. Why? Because we are already declared it as a global int g. So g equal to a plus b, simple, right? तो यहाँ पे हमने कोई डिक्लेरेशन जी की नहीं की. मेन के अंदर देखें कोई जी नहीं है, जी को हमने डिक्लेयर नहीं किया. हमने मेन से पहले किया और उसको बता दिया कि ये ग्लोबल है. मेन से पहले कर देंगे डिक्लेयर तो ये ग्लोबल खुद ऑटोमेटिकली बन जाता है, ठीक है. ग्लोबल बन जाता है और उसको हमने यूज़ किया, उसके अंदर रिजल्ट. अब देखें रिजल्ट इसमें आ गया जी इक्वल टू ए प्लस बी. अब मॉडिफाई हो जाता है जब, तो वो अगर if there are some other functions, they can also see the modified result of this global variable. It's like a shared variable among different functions of the program. All these functions can see what is happening to this value, the modified value of g. If function 1 is going to modify the value of g, it's changed now, then function 2 can also see the modified value. Function 3 can also, function 3, 4, whatsoever functions we have, they can see the modified value of the global variable. So this is the second example in which they say that if you have the same local and global variables, it means that you have the global variable with the name g, and also you have the local variable with the name g. Look at this. This is a global. This is outside the main function with the name g, and we assign it a value 20, right? And then here in this within main, we can define the local variable, and here again we use the same name g, and here we assign the value 10. So what will happen? Whether it will use this 20 value, global value, or local value. So if this is the case where you have the variables with the same name, then the local variable will be preferred. So preference will be given to this local variable if same names occur. So G10 value will be displayed on the screen. Right? Is it clear? So we have the
Yes,
20 value
yes.
as well as 10, but which will is preferred? The local variable is preferred. Similarly, you can have the global constants. Constants is something which its value doesn't change. Variable, its name indicates that variable, its value is changed, can be changed during the execution of the time, but constant is something it's not going to change, right? So constant, you can have simple constants in your program. You can also have the global constants in your program. So for global, you have to declare these constants outside main. So this is main, and this is the global constant which is outside the main at the start of the program. It's double pi. Its name is its constant name. Its name is pi, and its value is 3.14159, and we have to specify that this is we have to specify with the keyword const to represent that this pi is a constant, right? So we just simply in the program, we just simply let's suppose we want to include pi value. Let's suppose 2 pi f. So we just write 2 multiplied by pi multiply with f, right? So pi value, we write just pi, and its corresponding value will be used in our program, right? It's just a constant, but we declare it as a global, right? Storage class. Here you can see that a variable can have a name, type, size, and value. Not only this, an identifier in our program have also other attributes like storage class, scope, linkage. So there are three things which is associated with these identifiers. So identifier is actually the general name for the for naming in your C++ program. You can also call the variables as an identifier. You can also call the file name, a function name as an identifier. So each identifier in a program has other attributes. So these variables have other attributes like storage class. What will be the storage class? How long variable exists in the memory, and scope, where the variable can be referenced in the program, the region in which these can be accessed. Third one is the linkage. If you have the multiple source file program, which files can use these variables. So there are the three things also associated with these variables, right? So storage class, it defines the scope, visibility, and the lifetime of the variables or the functions. So not only variables, but also we can define the scope and the lifetime of function, right? These specifiers precede the type that they modify. So after there are five storage classes: auto, register, external, mutable, static. After this, these specifier precede the type that they modified. So you can write here auto, int, whatever, whatsoever, right? Like auto, the first class is one of the first class. Out of these five, we have auto. The auto storage class, what does it do? The auto storage class is the default storage class for all local variables. So if you have a block, let's suppose this is a block, or you have a function, right? Then when you declare a variable int mount here, so by default these all local variables are have the storage class of auto. So if you so whether you specifically write here auto or not, here we specifically write here auto int month. This is mount and this is month. So the two different variables. In for this variable we didn't write specifically auto, but here we write auto. But the example above defines two variables with the same storage class, right? Both have same storage class. So if you don't write by default, this mount will also have a auto storage class. So auto can only be used within the function that is local variable. So this auto can only be used with the local variables. So usually we don't write auto because by default it's auto storage class. Now come towards the second storage class, which is register. Register is register. This is a storage class. This is used to define local variables that should be stored in a register. So the values of the local variables that will be stored in a register instead of RAM. So register is the fastest. Register is faster than the RAM. So register is important in terms of computational time. It's fast. We can easily access the value from the register instead of RAM. It take a little bit more time as compared to register. Its register is more close to the CPU. Each CPU has its own register, so it's just directly access the register value, right? And its maximum has a size equal to word size. So word size is it can be 32 bits or it can be 64 bits, depend on the machine, right? How you can define a register example is that if you have a block, you just write the keyword register int mile, right? So in usually in the uh, assembly languages, or you have the registers, right? Low level programming languages have the register. You specifically define that, but here you can also define the register, but um, but here the compilers uh, can define these register itself. You don't need to declare it register. They can analyze if its value is frequently being used, so it load it in the register. ठीक है, मतलब आपके पास register है, ये fast है RAM के मुकाबले में, और अगर मतलब compilers ज़्यादातर खुद ही देख लेते हैं कि अगर कोई एक ऐसी value है जो बार बार frequently use हो रही है, ठीक है, बार बार यूज़ हो रही है वैल्यू, तो बजाय इसके कि वो रैम से बार बार लोड करें, उसको यूज़ करें वैल्यू को, वो रजिस्टर के अंदर उसकी वैल्यू प्लेस कर देता है और इजीली एक्सेस हो सकता है. ठीक है, इसमें कोई इतना डिफरेंट नहीं है, बस उसमें ये क्या है, थोड़ा फास्ट होता है रजिस्टर जो है, बाकी प्रोसेसिंग वगैरह तो सेम होती है. इट्स डिफरेंट इन टर्म्स ऑफ कंप्यूटेशन टाइम, इट टेक लेस टाइम, राइट? Static storage class, it's important. Static storage class um, this instruct the compiler to keep a local variable in existence during the lifetime of a program instead of creating and destroying it each time it comes into and goes out of the scope. So if it's not, what happened with the local variables? um, let's suppose we have a function, we call a function, variables are created, and their scope is within that function, and when this function ends, returns, those variables are destroyed. But the static variables, if you declare your local variable as static, if you write this keyword static int a, then what will happen? This will be there, its existence will be during the lifetime of the program. If you don't have the static, then their lifetime is within that function in which it's declared. So when this function is finished, the local variables are destroyed also. But if it's you called it as a static, then those variables will be there unless the program ends, the whole program ends. So it's lifetime, it exists lifetime of the program. Therefore, making local variables static allow them to maintain their value between functions called. So if you have the different functions calls and you are accessing the same static variable, then its value retains, right? एक ही फंक्शन है, अगर लेट्स सपोज इसमें आपने स्टैटिक वेरिएबल डिक्लेयर किया है लोकल वेरिएबल, और उसमें आप उसकी मॉडिफिकेशन भी कर रहे हैं, तो एक दफ़ा फंक्शन कॉल किया, लेट्स सपोज उसके अंदर आप इंक्रीमेंट कर रहे हैं, फंक्शन कॉल करें, इंक्रीमेंट करें, तो क्या होगा? एक दफ़ा फंक्शन कॉल किया, इंक्रीमेंट हुआ, अगली बार फंक्शन कॉल करेंगे तो इंक्रीमेंटेड वैल्यू दोबारा से इंक्रीमेंट होगी, ये नहीं कि इनिशियलाइज वैल्यू। ठीक है, एग्जाम्पल से क्लियर हो जाएगा। द स्टैटिक मॉडिफायर में ऑल्सो बी अप्लाइड टू द global variables. We can use the static variable with local variables as well as the global variables. So static can be used with both global variables and the local variables. When this is done, it causes the variable scope to be restricted to the file in which it is declared. So its lifetime is, the thing is that the lifetime, its lifetime is up to that program, right? So this is an example. Here you can see that this is the same hash include iStream. Then this is the function prototype, void func void. This is function prototype, and then we have the count variable, and this is outside the function. It's at the start of the program. So this is the global function, sorry, global variable, and we also declared that global variable as static, right? So now come towards the main function. Here we have the while loop. In the while loop, we are using this static count variable. We are declaring while count minus minus. We are calling some function within this repetition structure while we are calling some function. Let's come toward this function. Here it's function func, and within this function, here we can see that there are some local variable. There is a local variable int I, and its value is 5 here, and we also declare it static. So two things: we have the global variable count, its value is also static, right? And here we have a function. Within that function we have local variable, and also value is static. Storage class is static. So here, at the first time its value is 5, it's initialized with 5, and then I plus plus, and we are just displaying these values. I, which is the local static variable, I is I. Whatever the value is there in I will be displayed on the screen, and count is count. Though count is not declared in this function, look at this. This is the function count. Count is not declared. Here we only declare I. We just use count. We can use count here. Why? Because this count variable is a global variable. This global variable is accessible at any part of the program. This main function can also see this count. This function can access and this count. So we can access this count variable. Why this is global? But this I, this is a local variable. We can only access this I within this function. We cannot access this I within this main function. Main function have no visibility for this I. Main function cannot access this I because this I is local variable. Its scope is within this function, right? So this example actually explains how this static variable in case of global and in case of local works. And remember, static is its lifetime is up to the program execution of the program. So it's these variables are there up up till the end of the program, and their value will also be retained there. Static means static, but is static. It's not change, right? It's whatever modification is there. Um, uh, uh, it's only initialized once, right? Uh, right. So while count minus minus, we are calling this function, and within this function we are incrementing the value of I and displaying I is I and count is count. So at the first time count is 10 and here I is 5. So I is 5, but here in this program it becomes I plus plus, so it becomes 6. So I is 6 in first iteration and count is 9. Why? Because count minus minus. All right. So the value of count initialized with 10, but here it is displays at 9, right? And in the second iteration, again it's calling the function. Uh, this is the loop, and it's calling this function and again and again. So in the second iteration, again it's called this function. So come toward this function. It says that static int I equal to 5, but here initialization is only once at the start of the program for the static variable. We will use the modified value from the previous call. In the previous call, I value static variable I became 6. So now here I is 6, and due to I plus plus it becomes 7. So in the next iteration I is 7 and count is decremented. Count is decremented, so count is becomes 8. So I is incrementing and count is decrementing. So let's see what happen if I remove this static from here. Let's suppose I removed this is the local, this was the local static variable, but I remove this keyword static. What will be the output? Um,
Out will be 6.
Output in the first iteration it's 6, in the second iteration again
6.
6. Yes, कौन है हमारे साथ?
Abdul Rahman.
Rahman. अच्छा. Abdul Rahman said that if we remove this static keyword, whenever we call this function func, the value of I would be 6 displayed on the screen. So it's right. As this is not a static variable, so whenever we call this function, it go to this function and it sees that we initialize it with 5. It will again and again initialize I with 5, 5, 5, and then increment it with 1. So it becomes 6. So each time we call this function, I value will have 6 value within it. The output would be I is 5 and count is 9. I is 5 and sorry, I is 6, count is 9. I is 6. So I is 6, 6, 6. यहाँ पे सारा 6 होगा और ये तो static ही है तो इसलिए ठीक है. So if we just जहाँ पे now we have the static, so the modified value will be there retained in the program, and that value will be used. So जितनी बार भी आप फंक्शन को कॉल करेंगे, स्टैटिक की वजह से क्या होगा, पहली बार तो 5 है लेकिन इस प्रोग्राम इस फंक्शन के अंदर 6 बन चुकी है। नेक्स्ट टाइम कॉल किया तो आई में 6 पड़ा हुआ है, 6 क्या बन जाएगा, आई प्लस प्लस की वजह से 7 बन जाएगा। फिर देखिए इस वाइल में, वाइल क्या होता है, रिपीटिशन स्ट्रक्चर होता है, ये बार बार इसके अंदर जो भी स्टेटमेंट लिखी होती है उसको वो बार बार कॉल करता है। यहाँ पे क्या है, ये फंक्शन को बार बार कॉल कर रहा है। फंक्शन के अंदर क्या हो रहा है, ये इंक्रीमेंट हो रही है इसकी वैल्यू। तो अगर प्रीवियस वैल्यू 5 थी वो 6 बन जाएगी, 6 होगी तो 7 बन जाएगी, ठीक है। इस तरह से कंटिन्यूड होता जाएगा और इसकी वैल्यू इंक्रीमेंट होती जाएगी। एंड हेयर द ग्लोबल वेरिएबल काउंट इज आल्सो स्टैटिक, so it's being accessible to this function too, and because of this count minus minus it will be decrementing it in each iteration, हर iteration में इसकी वैल्यू डिक्रीमेंट होती जा रही है। जब काउंट 0 हो जाएगा तो फिर ये इस लूप से बाहर निकल आएगा, ठीक है। when count becomes 0 it will out of this loop and the program will be ended up, right? But when the count was 1, due to count minus minus it becomes 0, so here 0 is displayed on the screen. So the last is I is 15 and
मैम
count
0 के
is
बाद कैसे नहीं होगा, मतलब 0 कैसे एंड होगा?
इसमें क्या हुआ ना कि पहली बार काउंट की वैल्यू 10 है ना, तो कंडीशन ट्रू हो गई, लेकिन फिर काउंट माइनस माइनस पोस्ट डिक्रीमेंट भी है ना, सॉरी। तो ये जो डिक्रीमेंटेड वैल्यू है ये यूज हो रही है इस फंक्शन के अंदर। तो पहले जब 10 था तो 9 डिस्प्ले हुआ, फिर जब 1 होगा तो फिर 0 डिस्प्ले होगा, फिर जब 0 हो जाएगा तो while 0 मतलब कंडीशन फॉल्स, while we have some boolean expression, when the boolean expression is true लूप चलता रहता है। जब boolean expression false हो जाती है तो फिर हमारे पास क्या होता है, वो एंड हो जाता है। ट्रू होना, false होना, what does it mean? True means while 1 or it's not equal to 0, you can have a positive integer value as well. The positive integer value also shows that this is true while true. And if it's 0, what does it mean? It's false. So other than 0 and it's positive, it shows that it's true. And if becomes 0 it means it becomes false. Once it's false it is out of the loop. If you remember the flow chart, in the flow chart when the Boolean expression is true it's continued in the loop, and when it becomes false it is out of that loop and we go to the remaining part of the
यस
program.
मैम।
yes, तो फिर इसी तरह एक दफा false हो गया तो बस
excuse me, ma'am.
लूप से बाहर निकल आएगा। जी
मैम आपने यहाँ पे मेंशन तो नहीं किया ना पर कि अगर लेस देन 0 होगा तो ब्रेक कर लो, मतलब ब्रेक कर लो ना, तो ये इसके अंदर का मेंशन होता है
मतलब ये
फंक्शन
तो
के?
असल में इसका सिंटैक्स क्या होता है, वाइल का सिंटैक्स ये होता है कि वाइल बूलियन एक्सप्रेशन, तो बूलियन एक्सप्रेशन जब ट्रू होती है, बूलियन एक्सप्रेशन मतलब उसका बूलियन एक्सप्रेशन कहते ही उसको है जिसका रिजल्ट या ट्रू होगा या फॉल्स होगा। तो ट्रू होना या फॉल्स होना, ट्रू जब होता है मतलब उसका रिजल्ट 1 है, ठीक है, ट्रू है, या कोई पॉजिटिव इंटीजर भी हो तो मतलब हम कह सकते हैं कि ट्रू है। फॉल्स
नो मैम,
जब वो
वाइल के अंदर अगर हम वो लगा देते हैं कि इज इक्वल टू 0,
हाँ
काउंट इज
मतलब
इक्वल टू
हम
0,
हाँ वो उस तरह से भी हम लगा सकते हैं कि while count is
और
greater
नीचे
than 0।
फंक्शन में, वाइल के फंक्शन में हम कर लेते हैं काउंट माइनस
हाँ
माइनस डिक्रीमेंट।
हाँ, तो ये भी आप कर सकते हैं। मतलब ये जो लॉजिक है
ओके
जो दूसरी तरह से यूज किया गया है कि जब वो 0 हो जाएगा तो बस ये खत्म हो जाएगा लूप, तो वो ऑटोमेटिकली 10 टाइम्स कुछ इस तरह से चल जाता है प्रोग्राम, 0 से 9 तक चल जाता है ना, तो 10 टाइम्स। तो ये एक दूसरी किस्म की लॉजिक है जो इसको 10 बार ही चलाती है। तो जब वो 0 हो जाता है तो वो ऑटोमेटिकली इसमें से बाहर निकल आता है, क्योंकि वो उसकी काउंट की वैल्यू जब 0 हो जाती है तो वो समझता है कि बूलियन एक्सप्रेशन 0 हो गई, मतलब उसको तो ब्रैकेट्स, राउंड ब्रैकेट्स में 0 चाहिए ना, जब 0 मिल जाएगा तो वो लूप खत्म हो जाएगा।
अच्छा, मतलब नेगेटिव की साइड पे
समझ आ
जाता ही
गई,
नहीं,
समझ आ
नेगेटिव
गई।
नंबर।
ब्रैकेट में 0 हो जाए ऑटोमेटिकली फंक्शन एंड हो
हाँ
जाता है।
मतलब वो कंडीशन फॉल्स हो जाती है ना, वो तो फिर वो यूजुअली हम क्या करते हैं जनरल, वो बूलियन एक्सप्रेशन जब 0 हो जाती है तो वो कंडीशन फॉल्स हो जाती है, वो उसको पता चल जाता है कि कंडीशन फॉल्स हो गई, वो लूप से बाहर निकल आता है। लेकिन यहाँ पे काउंट की वैल्यू 0 हो रही है ना, तो वो बस वो उसको मिल रहा है ना, 0 मिल रहा है, तो ये लॉजिक इस
यस
तरह से
मैम।
बनी हुई है। और इस लॉजिक को आप चेंज भी कर सकते हैं इसी तरह से कि वो बुलियन एक्सप्रेशन लगा दे कि ग्रेटर काउंट वाइल काउंट ग्रेटर देन 0, जब तक काउंट ग्रेटर देन 0 है तो ये चलता रहेगा, 1 तक जाएगा, 10 से चलेगा और 1 तक जाएगा। सही है?
Yes, ma'am.
So next storage class is the extern storage class. The extern storage class is used to give a reference of a global variable that is visible to all the program files. So extern is usually used in that case in which you have multiple files. So you can see that this program, if you can see, this is one file, hash include, and you have some program, this is one file. You can have second file, third file, multiple files, right? And if you want to use, let's suppose, this count in another file, then you just use the keyword extern. So compilers knows that you are referring some variable which is defined in some other file. So it's actually used when you have multiple files. The extern storage class is used to give a reference of a global variable that is visible to all the program all the program files. When you use extern, the variable cannot be initialized as all it does is point the variable name at a storage location previously. ठीक है, जब आप extern को use करते हैं then you do not initialize it because using extern you are actually referring uh, uh, to a variable which is already defined in another file. तो आप तो सिर्फ रेफर कर रहे हैं ना कि ये एक वेरिएबल है, तो वहाँ पे आप डिक्लेयर वो ना आप क्या कहते हैं, इनिशियलाइज नहीं करते, आप सिर्फ बताते हैं कि ये एक वेरिएबल है जो कि किसी और फाइल में ऑलरेडी डिफाइंड है, हम उसको यूज करने जा रहे हैं. When you have multiple files and you define a global variable or a function, so you can have either a global variable or a function. Both can be used with extern, which will be used in other files. Then extern will be used in another file to give a reference of defined variable or function. ठीक है, दोनों के साथ, वेरिएबल के साथ भी यूज हो सकता है एंड फंक्शन के साथ भी extern यूज हो सकता है. So extern is used to declare a global variable or function in another file. The extern modifier is most commonly used when there. So when you have multiple files and these multiple files are sharing same global variable or function, then in that case you can use this extern. So here is example. This is the first file which we call it main.cpp. This is first file, and this is second file, support.cpp. This is second file. So here the same hash include, right? Then this is the global variable int count. This is int count, right? And then you have this write underscore extern. This is function prototype, void write underscore extern, then round brackets and semicolon. This is function prototype. And you call this as extern. It means that this function is not being defined in this file. This function is defined in some other file, and we are referring to that function. Write underscore extern is being defined in some other file, right? तो वो फाइल, अब देखिए ये फर्स्ट फाइल है, दिस इज द सेकंड फाइल, एंड इन दिस सेकंड फाइल here is the function definition. This is defined, this function is defined in second file. We are in the first file we are this is the function prototype, and we are telling the compiler through this extern keyword that this function is defined in some other file. So look at this second file, here it's defined. Here this write underscore extern function is defined. Void write underscore extern void. It means it doesn't taking any arguments, doesn't returning anything. Void mean empty, right? So what's going here? C out count is count. So it's just displaying the value of count, right? So come again towards first file. So count is there, global variable, and we are using some other function files function, write underscore extern. Main, the global variable, we initialize it with 5. We initialize this count variable as 5, and then we are calling this function. Here, this is the function call. Within this main function, initialization of the global variable count and function calling. So when we call this function, and we also, this function is not defined here. If we do not write this extern, it will give you an error that this function is not defined. But here we are specifically telling that this is extern, it's from external, right? So it will look into the second file, and here it according to the definition, it will just display count is count, right? So but here count, this count is a variable from this file. We declare it as a global variable in the first file, but we are referring count in the second file. How can we refer this count variable in the second file? By declaring count as an extern, right? It means that here the count is not being declared, this count is from another file. So this example is actually have taken both the cases. If you have the variable, and the variable from one file variable here is count, this count variable from first file is being used by the second file, right? So we declare here extern int count, and we are, as this count is global variable, so count is count. Count is count means 5 will be displayed. Why? Because before calling this function, we initialize it with 5. And the second case where we also see the function here in the first file, we are using the function write underscore extern, which is function from the second file. ठीक है, मतलब count जो है वो हमारे पास फर्स्ट फाइल में डिफाइंड है count, इसको हम यूज करने जा रहे हैं सेकंड फाइल में, तो हमने इसको बताना होगा कि ये एक्सटर्न, क्योंकि ये इसका नहीं है, ये दूसरी फाइल का वेरिएबल है, ग्लोबल वेरिएबल, ठीक है। तो इसको हमने बता दिया, और चूंकि ग्लोबल वेरिएबल है तो जो भी इसकी वैल्यू होगी मेमोरी में वही डिस्प्ले होगी। तो इसकी वैल्यू हमने यहाँ पर वैल्यू इनिशियलाइज की है फर्स्ट फाइल में 5, ठीक है, तो वही वैल्यू जो है वो डिस्प्ले करेगा। दूसरा केस हमने ये देखा कि राइट अंडरस्कोर एक्सटर्न ये फंक्शन है, ये फंक्शन हमने बताया कि ये फंक्शन जो है वो एक्सटर्न है, मतलब दूसरी फाइल में डिफाइन है, तो दूसरी फाइल में जाएगा, वहाँ पे जिस तरह से इसकी डेफिनेशन लिखी होगी उसके मुताबिक इसको रन कर लेगा। लेकिन बस ये बताना ज़रूरी होगा कि एक्सटर्न का कीवर्ड बताना ज़रूरी होगा। ठीक है, समझ आ गया?
यस मैम।
ठीक है। So extern is used where you have the multiple files and you want to share same variable among different multiple files, right? The mutable storage class, we will not go into the detail of mutable storage class because it's only applies to the class objects, which is the part of the object oriented programming. Here we are not doing the object orienting programming, we are the procedural programming, we are doing the procedural programming, and this is object oriented is a level high up the procedural programming, right? Oh, here is the scope rules. This is the last. We had the two topics: storage classes and what are the scope rules. So coming towards the scope rules. So scope, the portion of the program where identifier can be used. I already told you scope, that the portion of a program where those variables are visible, accessible, they can be used, ठीक है। वो region जिसके अंदर वो variables जो आपने declare किए हैं वो उसमें use हो सकते हैं, within the function declare किए हैं तो उसी function के अंदर use होंगे, ग्लोबल है तो पूरी फाइल के अंदर यूज हो सकते हैं। तो ये बस स्कोप है, उसके रूल्स क्या है वो इसमें है। स्कोप्स फॉर एन आइडेंटिफायर आर फंक्शन स्कोप, फाइल स्कोप, ब्लॉक स्कोप, फंक्शन प्रोटोटाइप स्कोप, क्लास स्कोप, ठीक है, नेम स्पेस स्कोप, राइट। फाइल स्कोप, पूरी you want that these variable must be accessible throughout your program. All the functions can use, can see, can these variables. Then the only possibility is that they must be global variables. So file scope, throughout the file these variables are accessible. So defined outside a function, known in all functions. Global variables, function definitions, these are all these also have file scope. Function prototypes, all these have file scope. ठीक है, इनका जो स्कोप है वो थ्रू आउट द फाइल में होगा. ठीक है. If you come toward the function scope, then within that function its scope is limited, can only be referenced inside the function in which they appear, cannot be referenced outside the function body. ठीक है. जैसे local variables हैं आपके पास, उसी function के अंदर आप उसको access कर सकते हैं, outside that function आप उसको access नहीं कर सकते. ठीक है, उसका scope function तक ही है. सही. जैसे labels वगैरह भी हमारे पास हो सकते हैं. labels केस लेबल्स हैं आपके पास स्विच के अंदर, वो विद इन दैट ब्लॉक आप उसको एक्सेस कर सकते हैं. सही. ब्लॉक स्कोप हमारे पास क्या है? आइडेंटिफायर्स डिक्लेयर इनसाइड द ब्लॉक, begins at the declaration, ends at the right bracket of the block, can be referenced in this range. Local variables, function parameters. इनके अच्छा, अब ब्लॉक हमारे पास मैंने आपको बताया था कि ये हमारे पास कर्ली ब्रैकेट स्टार्ट है, एंड है, इसके अंदर जो वेरिएबल्स आपने यूज़ किया है तो उसी ब्लॉक के अंदर आप इसको यूज़ कर सकते हैं. ठीक है. फिर हमारे पास इन केस ऑफ नेस्टेड ब्लॉक्स, आइडेंटिफायर्स इन इनर एंड द आउटर ब्लॉक हैव सेम नेम. If in case of nested blocks and identifiers in inner and identified in the outer block is hidden until inner block terminates. Right. So each block have its own scope. If it's inner block, then inner block variables have its scope within that inner block. Right. Static variables still have block scope. Storage duration does not affect the scope of the block. ठीक है. अगर variables आपके पास local हैं, if the variables are local and these are all also static, so their scope is up till that block. ठीक है. मतलब block scope, block के अंदर जो आपके पास variables defined है उनका scope वहीं तक होगा, simple. ठीक है, चाहे वो static ही है क्यों ना हो. Then come towards the function prototype scope. So in the function prototype you also have the parameter list. Like if you remember the program maximum, before int main you have the function prototype like double maximum, then round in within the round brackets you had three numbers, double num1 comma double num2 comma double num3, and then you have semicolon. So this was the function prototype. But I told you that declaring the variable name is not necessary in that case, but the data type is necessary. ठीक है. फंक्शन प्रोटोटाइप में वेरिएबल का नाम लिखना ज़रूरी नहीं होता, जैसे कि डबल num1 डबल num1 num2 num3 लिखना ज़रूरी नहीं होता, लेकिन टू स्पेसिफाई इट्स डाटा टाइप इज नेसेसरी. ठीक है, उसका डाटा टाइप बताना ज़रूरी होता है. ठीक है. द नेम्स जो आप वहाँ पे डिक्लेयर करते हैं तो उसका जो स्कोप है वो वहीं तक होता है. द स्कोप ऑफ दोज डिक्लेयर वेरिएबल्स विद इन द फंक्शन प्रोटोटाइप, इट्स स्कोप इज ओनली अप टू दैट स्टेटमेंट. क्योंकि आप वो स्पेसिफाई करें ना करें कोई इतना फर्क नहीं पड़ता. ठीक है. क्यों? क्योंकि यहाँ पे देखें, आप देखें, कंपाइलर इग्नोर्स द नेम इफ यूज्ड इन द पैरामीटर लिस्ट ऑफ द फंक्शन प्रोटोटाइप. इफ यू specify the name or not doesn't matter. Why? Compiler ignores the name in the parameter list. So if you have a single prototype, name can be used only once, right? So its scope is up to that function prototype, and identifier used in the function prototype can be reused elsewhere in the program. If you use num1, num2, num3 in the function prototype, its scope is up to there. You can reuse these num1, num2, num3 elsewhere in your program. ठीक है, उसका स्कोप वहां तक है, वो खत्म हो जाता है, उसके बाद उसकी विजिबिलिटी खत्म हो जाती है। फिर वो प्रोग्राम में कहीं भी और आप num1, num2, num3 यूज कर सकते हैं, वो नए वेरिएबल्स होंगे उसके लिए। स्कोप की बात है ना। So this is the example scoping example, right? In which there are three different types of variables have been used: global, local variables, static local variables, and we will see the effects of these. So we are okay. This is the program. This is the program. Here you can see that. Look at this hash include iostream. Then using namespace std, you can just write here. Then void use local void semicolon. What is this? This is function prototype. What is the name of function? Use local. Then second function, use static local. It means that this function will tell us the usability of local variables, and this will tell us the about the static how the static local variables works. And use global, this is the function prototype, and this would be about the global variables, right? So there are three in this program. There are three functions, and this is the function prototypes. Then come towards this global variable. Here global variable is int x equal to 1. The value of x is 1 here, right? Then int main function. Within this main function, you can see that here again we declare int x equal to 5. So the global variable name is also x, and the local variable within this main function is also x. Its value is 1, its value is 5. So see out, what will be printed? Local x in main outer scope is x. So I already told you that if you have both global variable and local variable with the same name, which will be preferred?
local.
Preference will be
Local variable.
preference will be given to the local variable. So here what will be displayed on the screen? Local x in main outer
5.
is 5. So if you go to the output, here you can see that local x in main's outer scope is 5, right? It's displayed on the screen. Now come back. After this, you can see that this is a start of new scope. Look at this. This is a block. This is curly brackets start and end. It becomes a block, right? And within this block, we have another declaration of the same variable x. Int x equal to 7. So its scope is within this block. So local x in main inner scope is, but what will be displayed on the screen? 7, right? X, this it's declared, so 7 will be displayed on the screen. Then again out of this block, again what's printed? Local x in main outer. Now we are out of this block, this inner block. We cannot access this x. We cannot access this one x, right? We are out of this block, and again we are here in the last line, we are displaying the value of x. So which x will be displayed? It will access this main x, main function x variable, local variable x. So first, when we are in the main function, 5 is displayed. When we are in this block, this inner block x will be value of this will be displayed, which is 7. And then when we are out of this block, then again the outer scope is, which is 5, will be displayed on the screen. Look at the output. First 5 is displayed, then 7, and then 5 is displayed, right? Okay, this is, we will go to the next slide. Okay, in the next slide, we have different function calls. First, we call a function use local. So we will go to the use local function definition. We call this function use local. We will go to the use local, and what's happening here? We declare again x, variable x, and we initialize with 25. And here we are displaying local x is, which value will be used? This value will be used, right? So here local x is 25 on entering the use local. Then we increment it plus x. So 25 becomes x becomes 26 due to plus x, right? Then local x is 26 on exiting use local. So we will go to the output screen. Here you can see that local x is 25 on entering use local, and it becomes 26 on exiting use local. So this is just a use local, right, function. Okay, this is executed. Now next line, there is another function call. This is use static local. So we will go to the use static local function. Here use static local function. In this function, we again declare x, but here we also declare that this is a static variable x. So here x is 50, and local static x is 50 on entering use local static local, right? Plus x, it becomes 51. So local static x is 51 on exiting use static local, right? So here is the output. uh, Local static is 50 on entering, and it becomes 51 on exiting, right? Now again come towards the program. This line is also executed, static local. After that, there is another
Next
call
slide,
to
ma'am.
use global. Okay. In the use global, you can see that there is no declaration of x. Global x is x. So there is no declaration. It means it's going to use the global variable x that we declared in the start of the program. Global variable, we declare it here. So this will be used by the program, by the function. This global variable is accessible to all the function, right? And here you can see in this we didn't declare it, so it will be using the global variable x on entering use global. So and then first one is displayed, then x multiply equal to 10, x value becomes 10. What does it mean? X multiply equal to 10. It's equal to it's the same as x equal to x multiply with 10. So 1 multiply with 10, the value of x becomes 10. Global x is 10 now on exiting use global. ठीक है, यहाँ पर हमारे पास ग्लोबल की वैल्यू x, ग्लोबल x की वैल्यू 1 है, फिर हमने इसको 10 बना दिया, और अब x ग्लोबल x में क्या पड़ा हुआ है? 10 पड़ा हुआ है. तो ग्लोबल is 1 on entering and 10 on exiting. ठीक है, अब दोबारा आ जाते हैं इसके अंदर जहाँ पे हमने फंक्शन कॉल किया. अच्छा, एक दफ़ा हमने ये कॉल कर लिया यूज़ लोकल यूज़ टैग, दोबारा से इस सेट को हम कॉल करें. वी आर अगेन कॉलिंग दिस फंक्शन टू सी द इफेक्ट्स of simple local variables and static local variables and the global variables. So when we again call the use local, within this we have x equal to 25, and incrementation it becomes 26. So come towards the use local, output of use local is 25 and 26. So in the first time it's also 25 and 26. On the second call of use local, it's again 25 and 26. It means there is no effect on the result of the local variables. So if you call it 1000 times, the same result will be displayed, right? As the local in the local variables, it's initializing each time. There is an initialization each time. Look at this initialization each time. So but here use static local, what will happen? Static local. So static local, I told you that it's only once initialized, and the modified value will be used for further processing. So in the first call, value of x was 50, and then it becomes 51. Now we are in the second call of use static local. So what's there in x? It's 51. So 51, local static x is 51 on entering use static local, and it becomes plus plus x. It becomes 52 then. The local static x is 52 on on exiting. So look at this. Local static x is 51 on entering and becomes 52 on exiting. So देखें इसमें local static इसमें चले जाएं. If on the first call it was 50 and 51, local static 50 and 51, and जब दोबारा हमने कॉल किया local static 51 52 बन गया. तो क्या डिफरेंस है लोकल वेरिएबल्स में और स्टैटिक वेरिएबल्स, स्टैटिक लोकल वेरिएबल्स में? तो लोकल वेरिएबल्स में रिजल्ट वही आता जाएगा 25 26, लेकिन स्टैटिक में जब एक दफ़ा चेंज हो गया वो चेंज्ड वैल्यू विल बी यूज्ड फर्दर. ठीक है, अब क्या रह गया है? द रिमेनिंग इज ओनली द ग्लोबल. वी आर कॉलिंग द ग्लोबल वेरिएबल अगेन, यूज ग्लोबल. ठीक है, फर्स्ट टाइम कॉल किया, दोबारा कॉल करेंगे. तो चले जाते हैं ग्लोबल के पास. तो ग्लोबल में क्या हो रहा है? व्हाट्स हैपनिंग हियर? द ग्लोबल x इज x ऑन एंटरिंग यूज ग्लोबल, एंड देन x की वैल्यू को मल्टीप्लाई करें 10 के साथ, एंड देन वी आर अगेन डिस्प्लेइंग दैट वैल्यू. ठीक है, सो फर्स्ट so this is the global variable x. Its value in the first call was 1, and then it became 10. So after first call the value of x was 10. Now in the second call the value of x is 10 there. So here global x is 10 on entering use global, and then due to this expression x multiply equal to 10, x
100.
becomes 10 multiply 10, it becomes 100. So global x is 100 on exiting use global. तो ये हमारे पास आउटपुट है. तो देखिए पहले कॉल पर क्या था? 1 और 10 था ये ग्लोबल वाला, और ग्लोबल को दोबारा कॉल किया तो वो प्रीवियस वैल्यू 10 को डिस्प्ले किया और फिर 100 को डिस्प्ले किया. एंड देन द लास्ट लाइन आफ्टर कॉलिंग ऑल दीज फंक्शंस, after these function calls, okay, after these function calls we have local x in main is. अब क्या डिस्प्ले होगा? मेन के अंदर x की क्या वैल्यू है? 5. तो 5 ही डिस्प्ले होगा. ठीक है, 5 डिस्प्ले हो जाएगा. मेन के अंदर जो x की वैल्यू थी वो दैट इज डिस्प्लेड एट द एंड. So if these are local variables, the output will be the same, and if they are static the value retained there, and the modified value, the updated value will further be used if you have different function calls, if you are changing its value. So the modified value will be used for further processing. Similarly for global, the modified global is just like shared value variable, shared variable. So when one function change its value the other also see that. So here too the modified value of global will be used for further processing. ठीक है, this is the end of the lecture. If you have any question.
मैम क्लास